Good morning and welcome to today's presentation about transforming spatial data to contribute to Esri's Community Maps program. Really glad you could join us. My name is Dale Lutz. I'm a co-founder and vice president of Safe Software, and I'm joined today by my friend Steve Grisey, who's a solution architect at Vertex 3. Are you there, Steve?
Yeah, I am. Good morning, everyone.
Okay. So, by way of introduction, I guess I've been around SAFE since the very beginning and have been working in the development of our FME product as well as the data interoperability extension. And Steve comes to us after a number of years working at Esri in a variety of roles, and especially around the data modeling side. That's how SAFE has worked with Steve. And most recently, we've started to work with Steve to prepare some templates or examples around using FME technology to move data into some of the Esri data models. And I'll also mention that Steve is very famous around SAFE for having been the person that actually coined and suggested the way that the data interoperability spatial ETL tools work. Isn't that right, Steve?
Yeah, I guess it is, Dale. And what I was been saying about that is that and $5 will get you something nice at Starbucks.
Yeah. So anything else by way of introduction, Steve, for yourself?
No, I think that's great. I'm excited to be presenting on this, and I think there's some very interesting ways people will learn how to use FME technology with the ArcGIS for local government and some base map work we'll talk about this morning.
Excellent. So we're also joined today by Robin Rennie, who's our product support specialist at SAFE with a focus on the Esri products and databases. So if you have any questions around databases or Esri products, fire them in through the question window. And even as we're going on, if questions arise, don't hesitate to pepper Robin. She's sitting there a little bit too relaxed right now, just enjoying her special brew of coffee and waiting for someone to chime in. So anyway, that's Robin. Thanks for joining us. She does have an Australian accent. You may pick that up in her typing. She's eating Vegemite for breakfast here. So just in terms of an agenda, we're going to just go through some of the challenges that folks can have when preparing data. We'll talk about how FME technology, and we'll use that phrase throughout this webinar, FME technology. When we say that, we mean either the FME product that you would buy from SAFE or a reseller of ours, or the data interoperability extension from Esri. Both those things, as far as all the stuff we're showing today, are equivalent. There's only a minor difference in terms of how you actually launch into the products, but all the principles, everything that you see today applies equally to either one. And just to be very clear, Safe Software, we're just as happy to have you buy either one of these, or hey, buy them both. We're happy either way. So FME technology refers to both the data interop, and that's the way we say it in short form, incidentally. We don't say DIE, we say data interop. Or the FME desktop thing. We'll look at some of the strategies that Steve has evolved as he's gone through the exercise. And at the end, we'll look at some of the things about beyond the program. Now, to sort of set this up, what we did was, as an experiment, engage Steve to take some of the source data that we got from the city of Austin, Texas, and we do want to thank them for having years ago made their data available. And around SAFE, they're also known as the city of Interopolis. If you've taken any of our training, you've seen their data used there. And we thought we'd go through the exercise about how would we set up a transformation from their data, whatever it was that we had, and it would be old data that we were playing with here. And what would be the lessons learned in the exercise to bring that into that Community Maps data model. And that's really the scenario that we'll be going through. But I also want to mention that later on we're going to give you a chance to possibly get one of 10 free seats in an FME desktop training that's coming up in about 10 days, or actually it's next week. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned and we'll tell you when you can chime in on that. Wow, is it time for a poll already? So is this going to be, let me just take a look here. I got to figure out how to do this. We want to get to know you a little bit better, and this isn't going to be a poll about the HST, which we have in BC, or about raising the debt ceiling, but it's really asking you about when you're planning. Let's see, here we go. So we want to ask you all, just to get a sense to know where you're coming from, when do you plan, or if you plan, to to contribute your data to the Community Maps program. So the poll should be open now, and hopefully there's results coming in. Yes, there are. So I see that, let's see, some of you are underway already, and that's really quite interesting. Let's take a look. We got I'm almost 50-50 in terms of folks that aren't planning to do it or don't know, as well as those that are underway. And so I think when we get a few more votes in, I will close the polls, and then we'll share the answers. So, okay, we've got a pretty good turnout there at 90%, and we're going to call that, 91. Okay, well, I'm going to call that good. So thank you very much for your, participation, and I'm going to share the results now. So look at that. A fifth of you are actually actively working on it now. Another 15% are going to be in a very short time, and by the end of the year, let's see, if we add that up together, that would be 28 plus 21 would be 49. So not quite a majority of you are going to be going into this within a year, and yet some of you don't know. But hopefully by the end of today, you'll see that at least some part of that won't be too hard to deal with. So that's great. Thank you very much for letting us know where you're at with that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting result, actually, and interesting to see how people are moving in that direction. What I wanted to do next is just give you a little bit of background or a little bit of context on the Community Maps program. For those of you that are already familiar with it, there may be some new information, and for those of you that don't know much about it, there certainly is some new information. One of the ways to think about this Community Maps program is it's really content, or it's online content for the ArcGIS or the GIS user community. So it's a little bit specialized in the sense that it's targeted towards that group. It's available through ArcGIS Online. The place you get to it is through arcgis.com. And what I've got here is a few screenshots from a city that shared their information with the program, and this is the Topographic Map, which is mostly what we're going to talk about today. It's a really interesting map, though. You can see in the top left that there's addresses on top of the buildings, there's swimming pools in the backyards, or the side yard in this case, and when you zoom out to different scales, it's a nice map, and you can see on the right-hand side there's even trees and details around parks and different features within the harbor area down in the bottom as well. So it's a really nice map at different scales here, and it's designed to work well on the web. The origins of this really is the realization by Esri and others that really to do GIS on the web we need these base maps. So you see base maps like Microsoft with Bing have provided, and Google and others, generate from commercial sources, and so the idea here is that Esri started working on trying to build these same kind of maps services with global data sets, but of course what they really needed was the high resolution data from the local sources to fill in the pictures at the larger scales. And that's really what this program, or participation in this program, is all about, is sort of in that last 4 zoom scales, providing your information in there, making that available to other people for your own purposes within your own organization, but for your neighbors and for others as well. And again, you can see here, I'm showing 2 pictures. One of them is some of the current content off of the website zoomed into the maximum scale, and again here in this jurisdiction you can see swimming pools and deck features and other things like that in at that scale. And what we're seeing on the right-hand side is a first cut, or the results of some of this work that I've done with FME to make the City of Austin data available using FME to build the actual data model. And one of the new pieces of information here for those that are just getting into this is that this program really for the base maps is starting to be more tightly tied to a new idea called ArcGIS for local government. So Esri's been working on a number of different applications and maps and business-oriented applications that are downloadable. In the bottom right-hand side, you can see the ArcGIS Resource Center. It's at resources.esri.com. You can get to these things. You can download the base maps. You can look at them. On the left-hand side, you'll see there's a local government geodatabase. So What the really neat thing about this is there's been a lot of work put into making multiple base maps from the same database, the same information model, not something completely different than what most people would manage in their local government GIS on a daily basis. So it's pretty neat because you get these multiple multi-scale base maps that can work for your own purposes, plus it makes it pretty easy to share out with Esri and the rest of the community and get those things hosted out on ArcGIS.com for you. Again, so the way that most people would access this, or one of the ways to access it as a user, is to go to ArcGIS.com and click on the Make a Map button. And you see there's a list of base maps, and the one that I've highlighted is the default one, the topographic base map, and that's the one that we've been working with and what the examples will show. So it's a pretty powerful idea. You take your data set, you push it into, or sometimes people say pour it into the data model, and then you get these maps from it and you can share it with others in the community. I'll hand it over to Dale to talk about FME technology a bit more.
Yeah, so just to kind of give some background about who Safe Software is for those that don't know, we've been around since '93, where we like to say we're headquartered in Vancouver. I'm not sure that since the riots that's such a badge of honor. I was just at the Esri UC last week, and some of my friends from Penn Bay Media gave me Boston Bruins hats, and I had to suffer the indignity of wearing that one night. And actually, I bumped into a Vancouver City police officer that night who gave me a little bit of hassle for wearing that thing. So we're about 90-ish employees. With really a global presence in terms of resellers, and today we have thousands of customers. And the other thing I would add to this all is that we've been working with Esri since really 1996 in a variety of ways, assisting them on pro services projects, among other things, and since 2005, providing the technology that's really the data interoperability extension. And so we're very excited about initiatives like the Community Maps program, because one of the key things there is the importance of transferring data from however a community is already using their data and has it structured into the data model that can be used conveniently and quickly for Community Maps or ArcGIS for local government. So it's time for another poll question just to get to know the audience a little bit more again. And so what we want to do is launch this poll now. And we're really asking the question, how long have you been using FME technology? Or maybe have you been using FME technology, just to get a sense for where the audience is at. That will help us know for the rest of the conversation. So it looks like more than half of you have been using it for quite some time. We've got about a fifth of you that have never used it. So anyway, hopefully today you'll certainly learn some more about that. I'm just going to let a few more votes come in, and then we'll close the poll. So we're getting close there. There's a couple more votes, and we'll call that good. Okay, we'll close the poll and show you all what that looked like. So as it ended up, 17% haven't used it yet. There's a few that are fairly recent, but actually a majority of folks that have been using it for quite some time. So that will help Steve and I know that how we go through things, how to pace things. So thanks very much for that. Okay, so for those that didn't know, for the 17% of you, we like to say that FME is a tool that allows you to achieve total spatial data mastery, or as another way of saying it, we say FME lets you put data in its place. And so in this case, we want to be putting data in the place where it can be used conveniently for community maps. Now, FME technology has a number of different capabilities to it. We sum it all up by saying that you use FME technology, whether it's data interop or FME, to transform data to either use it or share it. So you can do this with a wide range of data types, all the way from point clouds to CAD to GIS to rasters, 3D, BIM, things like that. Oh, I'm echoing. I think, Aaron, you're broadcasting. So anyway, you can do that, and you can use us to convert, integrate, transform, and share as well. So all these things can be done using FME technology. So why is it relevant here? Well, there's three things that are important to recognize about what FME brings to the table when you think about putting data into community maps. One is that the format might be an issue. Now, most of the folks going to be doing this are likely already in an Esri format of some kind, so that may not be quite so relevant. But with FME technology, if you had some data that's sitting in a CAD system or perhaps an Intergraph system or other things, and you wanted to publish that into community maps, you definitely can erase the format barrier from your problem. But the more probable situation is that you have data lying around in shapefiles or geodatabases, but it's in the wrong data model. The columns aren't right, the codes don't line up, the subtypes and domains don't match, and I know Steve's going to show us some techniques for solving these things. You have to get all that reconciled and squared away in order to effectively get your data in all of its fullness into the Community Maps program. And lastly, of course, it might not be in the right coordinate system, and that's a problem that's not generally too difficult to solve, but definitely along the way as you're doing the transformation in one nice step, you can just solve the coordinate system issue as well. So when you think about FME, a lot of folks just think of us as solving format issues, and that sort of sells the FME technology or data interop short, because really it's this thing called the FME workbench, or inside of data interop it's called a Spatial ETL tool that really does all the magic for you. It's a graphical environment for authoring tasks that involve restructuring or rearranging data from wherever it is to wherever it needs to be. And so Steve's going to be showing us some of the things he set up and created as part of his initiative to bring this older Austin City data into the Community Maps program and the various types of workflows he created using the workbench. Now these things, if you're in data interop land, these things that you create are tools just like any other geoprocessing tool, and you can then run them from within Model Builder as part of some other bigger geoprocessing task. If you're outside of that in the FME land, you can batch these things from the command line, you can run them interactively, or in fact, we're not going to talk about it too much, but you could push these things up to an FME server, which can have a scheduler on it that runs them every Friday at midnight, and you get a nice log file mailed to you when that's done. So that just gives you some idea. You don't have to run these things interactively from within the workbench environment. Now, part of any kind of data transformation is understanding where you are or where you want to be. And we like to say that FME's place in the food chain is that we're always to blame, because everybody's data is always perfect, as you all know. And so if you put some data in FME and out it comes the other end and something's wrong or missing, obviously it's FME's fault. And so after, let's say, 18 years of having that kind of wrap applied to us, we came up with the idea that really we should allow you to inspect your data using a very simple viewing or inspection tool, so you can tell exactly what you have to start with so that there's no surprises when you get to the other end. So it's a very nice tool to quickly see what there is to begin with, make sure it's what you think it is, and that way when it comes out the other end, you don't blame us if it's not quite what you think, because in fact we can't make water or squeeze water out of stones. We can come close, but if your data is no good to begin with, it's a little hard to make it perfect on the way out.
Okay, Dale, thanks for that intro. So what I want to shift to now is strategies for sharing data. And one way to think about this is to imagine taking your source data and using FME and pushing over to the target geodatabase and producing the maps that you want to do, and doing that on a one-time basis, almost like a migration where, hey, we like this data model, we really want to move forward with geodatabase, and here's how we're going to structure things, and just sort of do this one time. But as sort of Dale mentioned in his FME server comment, we can also use FME to do ongoing publishing as well. So it might take you a while to move your data maintenance environment or to make all of the changes that you do in the back end for managing the information, but you might want to take advantage of some of the maps and apps in ArcGIS for local government and other things to move that over on an ongoing basis and keep publishing or keep pushing the information out on an ongoing basis. And so really what we're talking about here in this particular case is on the left-hand side what I received or what I downloaded for the city of Austin, actually was a bunch of shapefiles, and this should look familiar to many of you, where I've got a number of contours data sets, I've got some hydrography, I've got land, and all sorts of other things, and piles of shapefiles, really, right, as a starting point for most of us in these things. But also Austin did have a few geodatabase items and a few things in CAD format. And like Dale mentioned, the format doesn't really matter. The tricky parts are actually getting the information into the right data model, and that's part of what we'll talk about. And the target in this case is actually this map that we're looking at now. And so this is a smaller subset of information in the city of Austin, sort of centered around the capital and the downtown area. And I'll explain a little bit why I went this route. But generally what I like to do is clip it down to a small area that has a good representative cross-section of everything in the map or everything in the data model, work on that, and get that right, and then I'll run the whole load on the entire city, which could take hours with some of the processing going on. I like to get it right first, like we're looking at here, and then eventually I'll push that over and make it work with the whole city. But this is really our target in this case. It's some feature classes or some layers here inside of the geodatabase that we're looking at, and there's a number of things that we'll go through now to sort of walk you through it. But I wanted to point out too at this point that it's not just a sort of pretty picture here that we have the source data and the target on the right. It's also a pretty powerful part of the way that FME works. So in this case here, what we're looking at is a street centerline data set on the left-hand side. That's one of those shape files. We do a few things in the middle here to do some transformation, to make some changes to the model as we go, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But the target on the right-hand side is the road center line. So one of the things that's pretty neat in FME is you're almost always just reading once, doing some manipulation, and writing once. If you're familiar with ArcGIS geoprocessing or other tools that you might use, frequently you create multiple data sets along the way as you're doing the processing, and as a result, FME a lot of times, because it's just reading once and writing once, can actually be much, much faster, especially on larger things. And if you're wondering about, well, that's fine for the workbench in FME, if we went to look at a spatial ETL tool here, it looks exactly the same for this streets data set on the left-hand side as a shapefile, and the road center line and the target on the right-hand side. So this, again, this is a spatial ETL tool. The way that I got to that thing is I have a toolbox in ArcGIS Desktop, and I just said new spatial ETL tool and answered a few questions about format, and now I have this thing available. And like Dale mentioned, because it's a geoprocessing tool now, you can pass it parameters, you can use it in other models, there's all sorts of ways that you can access this thing. And FME as a standalone product can also be accessed in a number of ways, but it fits very nicely in this context when you're using the data interop extension inside of ArcGIS Desktop. So again, it's a pretty powerful idea that we can go from the source to the target on either side here. And what I wanted to do next was just jump into a few different examples. So the first one we're going to actually go through is do this thing I mentioned of clipping the source data sets. You can see this sort of fan shape on the left-hand side where I've got that huge number of shape files on the left. I want to do the clipping operation on those things and output them all to a source folder. So let's go in and look at that and how that works here in Workbench. So I'll switch over. I've got several, actually 4 different FME mapping files that I put together for this project. We could organize it all in one big one, but I like sort of trying to make them a little more bite-sized when I'm working on things. And if we zoom in a little bit more here, you can see I've got a clip feature here, which is it's a polygon I just drew around the downtown area where I wanted to do some work. And I've got all of these different shape files here, and if we went and looked, we could, on the left-hand side, we can see all of those different sources for the shape files. But you can see just a few of them are highlighted in brown. The bike routes and the clip polygon are the only ones that are enabled. So what we're going to do is run data sets through. We're actually going to do a reproject. This is a pretty important piece for those of you that are heavy ArcGIS users. ArcGIS is very accommodating in the way that it deals with spatial references, in the sense that sometimes you don't really have to care that much about spatial references, and either ArcCatalog or ArcMap or GeoDatabase will sort of work things out. FME, on the other hand, is very picky, so you need to be very specific about spatial references to make sure that you get your X's and Y's in the target database just right. And in this case, I was reprojecting everything to the 3857 spatial reference, or one of the latest spherical Mercator standard. There is some debate, for local government users about whether it's better to use the local state plane coordinate system or whether it's better to use the spherical Mercator for the target. In this case, I chose to go all with spherical Mercator, but of course, if you wanted to change this around, it'd be easy enough to do in FME. You can just go to the transformer and you can pick the spatial reference that you want to use. And of course, if you get into it, there's lots of those things to choose from, and everything that you'd see in ArcGIS or elsewhere would be supported in that. So let's just go ahead and run this tool. FME is pretty neat because as it's running, you can actually still interact with it, and I can show you here the target that it's writing to. One of the interesting things I've done here is rather than having a copy of all those shapefile things on the right-hand side, I use a dynamic schema here. So all that means is everything coming in from the left, the schools 2010, when it gets clipped, it's on the right-hand side, it's going to create a schools 2010 shapefile. It'll create a bike routes 2010 shapefile on the right-hand side in the folder that I specified. And maybe that's a little bit hard to understand, but essentially what's happened here is we've read all of those source features that came through, and we had about 4,000 of them. We reprojected those things. We clipped them with the polygon. We ended up, in this case, with about 304, well, actually precisely 340 that were inside the clip area and 40 that got clipped on the boundary. And what that did is it wrote the new bike routes shapefile in the folder that I specified, which is actually in my source directory. And some of my subsequent tools now will work off of that source data set. Go ahead.
So Steve, I noticed that many of them are kind of gray there on the left-hand side. I guess somehow you've set up this workspace, but then as you're experimenting with things, I guess you're somehow able to enable and disable things. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So I could go pick on a few of these because I want to work on the building footprints or a couple of these things at the same time, and I can enable those objects, or I could click back on here and just enable only this feature type, or enable only this feature type.
So really, this is all about basically subsetting or making sure that you have the smallest amount of data as you're doing the development and experimenting, and so it lets you do turnaround very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to narrow it down and make it really efficient, because the tough problems are getting all those little data model things dialed in, and that's more time consuming actually, and it's frustrating to spend hours sitting here waiting when you could just do a few things at a time. And it's great because then I can just select everything and say enable later on, and then I can run the whole thing. So that's the first example. And the real value here, like we were just talking about, is it saves us time while we're refining and working on the load process. Now let's get into a little more detail on one of the specific examples. And I'm just going to pick on, again, a couple of these ones to give you some highlights of the technology and how we can use it. So this one's actually using a schema mapper. And what that does is it lets me manage some of the complex codes like road classification schemes and things like that in a spreadsheet. So essentially what I've got here is a spreadsheet. I've got a road class worksheet in it, and the source field name is called road class, and the target field name is road class without an underscore in it. And basically all I'm doing here is taking some of those codes, and everybody's got these, whether they're census codes or some other transportation scheme for the hierarchy of the road system. I need to map those from the integer values that they are in the source shapefile over to a string value for local and ramp and minor arterial and things like that. And so not knowing the source shapefile very well, it took me a fair bit of time in this case to figure out, well, are both number 4 and number 5 a minor arterial, or is 5 actually a ramp? Well, actually, no, number 10 is a ramp. And so I had to work through this a little bit, and this is one of the things that a lot of us spend time iterating on. It's really handy to be able to use this in a spreadsheet form, because what we can do, let me go jump over here and show you the mapping file for this. I actually showed you this briefly already with the street shapefile. Here's where I'm doing the schema mapper work. I'm specifying that. I won't select it again, but that's the same spreadsheet we were just looking at. And it's already picked up these values for me. It's read everything from the spreadsheet like we were just looking at. And now I have a few other things to set here as far as what filter and what the destination attribute name is. But once I do that now, that's all set up and ready to go, and everything that gets mapped is going to run through here and go over to the road centerline database or the feature class.
I guess you can also fiddle with that spreadsheet at a later time. Like even if you don't have to go back to this workspace and adjust anything, you can keep adding codes and adjusting until it looks right. Is that what you did?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it makes it really handy.
The things on the right-hand side of that spreadsheet, you somehow knew that those were the things for the data model that you had to hit, I guess. Somewhere in that data model it told you those longer names like Arterial Road and so on?
Yeah, and if we went back and looked at the data dictionary or the information that comes with that geodatabase, it will actually spell out all of the domains for us and give us all the detail actually.
So really the point is we have to take whatever we have, whether it's crazy codes or whatever else, and transform that into the vocabulary of the Qnity Maps program. And that's really, I think, where the interesting, exciting stuff happens, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's the hardest part of the work too, right? And so being able to manage it in a spreadsheet and work with it like this, it's really convenient. And of course, lots of people could do this work in the spreadsheet where maybe only a few people know how to use FME in the organization.
I was also going to comment that we probably have the 99 people in the world that would find this sort of thing exciting online today. So I realize that using the word exciting and schema mapper in the same sentence doesn't happen a lot in normal conversation.
Well, at least let's hope not. So another one I've got going here is just a thing to fetch a few parameters. So it's parameters just like you might see in ArcGIS geoprocessing. We have parameters in FME as well. And I've gotten in the habit of actually passing in parameters for the last editor and the last update fields. Who was the last editor and when did it happen? I used to do time stamping and things like that quite a bit and the operating system username, but as I've done more work, I kind of like to be able to have some control over populating those values and how it works, usually because I'm running it as part of a script and I want to update everything for today, and I don't necessarily want to use the operating system username. So parameter fetcher is another transformer that we can use here to pull those things together. And many of you are already familiar with FME, but one of the key things is that now on the right-hand side here, you can see in green all of the things where I've actually got field names lining up and the ones that I care about. I can do a little bit of string art in here to do the comparison and see which is which, so I can get my chopped field names from the, when shapefiles, all the field names get chopped, so the left from underscore is actually the from left in the target data model, those sorts of things. I can review this and take a look at it and fine tune it, and I can also assess whether I really need some of these fields in order to make the map work correctly. Some of the fields are really important, like that road classification. Other fields, like an alternate road name, aren't really that important for the map purposes.
So Steve, that red stuff, what does that mean there?
That means that I'm not going to get any values there in the target feature class because I haven't mapped to anything in the source data set.
And that's okay with you, I guess.
Well, yeah, it's one of these exercises where you'd kind of like to have all of those values, but they just don't all exist in the source data set. So
it goes back to my comment about squeezing water out of a stone, I guess. But if you can make the map without it, you just have to go with what you got.
Yeah, exactly. And it turns out the one that really matters as far as the map is concerned is that road. Of course, some of the name information is important to draw the map at different scales, but the classification, so that some roads show up in gray and some roads show up in red. This is actually the really important part of this map, is actually getting the classification scheme right so that we get ramps looking like ramps and things stacking correctly based on the hierarchy of the road system.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I spent more time on that one probably than most of the others, just because of the complexity of doing that. So another piece, let's just jump back to the PowerPoint here. Another one I'll show you is also the same sort of thing for facility site codes. For those of you that have looked at the local government data model or seen some of the work that's gone on in that area in the last few years, you'll maybe have already heard about these facility sites. Essentially what they are, it's probably easier to explain in map form, is you can imagine around the state capitol in this case and things like the university. So in the state capitol is the building or the complex down here in this area. Or another example here is just north of there is a good example here because we have the University of Texas at Austin. And you can see these, in here it's a little more clear because you see these sort of pinkish or light purple colored polygons representing the outline or the campus for the university. And what it turns out is a big part of the data model for the map here and also for the local government data model in general is getting together a list of these facility sites. And there's a couple of major pieces to doing that. The first one is in many cases we'll have multiple shape files. Like here we have, in this case, these are for points. We have a bunch of facilities, and these would be things like parks and hospitals and things like that that the city's already got as shape files. But of course, usually, when you talk to most local government organizations and they say they have 300 layers, usually around 200 or more of those layers would actually be a shape file for hospitals or a shape file for schools, or actually maybe 3 or 4 shape files for schools for different levels of schools and that kind of thing. And what this data model does is it collapses those things down into one facility site point with subtypes and domain values inside of them. So this is a pretty complicated, or one of the heavy lifting parts of using this data model is taking all of those source point shape files, combining them together into a facility site polygon. And again, you can see we're doing some schema mapping stuff and some other things here, but it's maybe even a little bit more interesting if we get down and look at the polygons in this case, because even though the City of Austin had a bunch of points that would represent those facilities, they didn't have anything for the polygons. And I looked around for different sources. We have parks was the only one that was there in polygon form. And the only other source I could find here was actually the land use from 2008. And it's not a perfect fit, but it's maybe not a bad starting point for those that are looking to get going with these facility site polygons. And essentially what I did on this, I started with the schema mapper. And again, what we did in this case is we were taking the land use codes, which are, I'm sure somebody in planning in the City of Austin knows what all these are, but it took me a while to figure them all out. And maybe equally hard to figure out were the subtype field values that I needed in the target data model. So these things like 810 and 720 would represent broad categories like education or medical and that sort of thing. And that's really what we're loading in this case. But of course, just using all of the land polygons wouldn't really be a good idea because we really just want certain categories of information. So part of what I'm doing here is I'm doing an attribute exposer, and that's really just creating me a subtype field that I can put something into. And then I'm doing this test filter here, and essentially making sure that the subtype field isn't blank. Anything going through here that I didn't map in my schema mapper is going to come out blank, and I'm just going to ignore it. Then I'm going to take all of those things like schools or educational facilities and medical and all those other categories and dissolve those polygons and try to group them by subtype field and make, if they were adjacent, I had one place where there was a marina that was made up of 3 or 4 marina parcels that all had land use on them. I wanted to represent that as one polygon. This dissolver will take those 4 things and put them together into that one polygon. Do a little bit more here with just a description to say how the heck I did this. So I was just documenting that I created this from the city land use codes. And I'm going to do a few more things again to do some parameter fetcher stuff on the last update and last editor. And you can see here now I've got the subtype field. I'm going to have the F code, which is a domain value for that thing, the description, and I'm missing the facility ID and the name, which is a little frustrating because a lot of what this map depends on would be actually showing, drawing the text on here for University of Texas at Austin. I didn't have the names, and it would be a fair bit of work for someone to go and put all of this together for the whole city. But that's just some data work that somebody would have to do as part of building this facility site thing. But it's pretty neat, though. Let's go back and do our thing here where we only enable this feature type, and we'll Enable this guy, and we'll enable this guy. And even though we're doing some pretty complex processing here, remember we're just doing it on a small geographic area. We're not doing it on the whole city here. And again, one of the things that...
While it's going there, I was thinking back to my youth in the movie Ghostbusters, and I do notice that you are crossing the streams there just before that parameter fetcher. So what's actually going on there? We got two lines coming into one thing. Does that mean something bad happens, or is it okay?
In this case, it's okay to cross the streams. Yes.
Okay.
The one line is the parks data set coming through, and it doesn't need to be dissolved or anything else. And the other line coming through is the results of that dissolve on the land use. So I may get a little bit of duplication on parks and things, but actually when I looked at this some more, it wasn't really creating me too much trouble. So again, just to give you the numbers, we read about 8,000 land use polygons in that subset right in the downtown area. We ignored a bunch. Actually, when we did the schema mapping, we got about 2,300 out of that. And when we dissolved, that turned into about 1,100 things. And altogether, we wrote out about 1,150 polygons. And if we go back now, and all we really need to do actually is refresh the map here. Works pretty nicely with ArcMap. Don't get things locked up anymore. Things are pretty good for that. So if we go and look at facility sites at the 2000 scale, you can see it says it's created from the city land use, and I've got the date in here, right, and it was me that updated it. So pretty straightforward, right, to be running this stuff through and to be taking a look at it. It only takes a few minutes now, and then I can iterate and come back to the map and say, oh, did I get these mauve polygons right this time, and what else do I need to do to make this map look a little bit better? And frankly, it would be nice if I could have gone a little further on this and started to join some of these other mauve polygons together to make the overall university campus, because actually this map is pretty dependent on getting the representation at different scales of these facility sites. So it's a little bit tricky. It wants to actually, at each one of these scales will have a definition query based on the size of the polygon. So here the shape area has to be, I guess, 100,000 square feet. And so you'd kind of like when you're zooming out to these different scales to still see the university polygon. So this is one of the areas that you get into in this area that I might want to do some further work on this, or I'd probably, in the City of Austin case and most other jurisdictions too, come up with a bit more of a strategy of how to really get this thing right so it shows up really nicely at the different scales as designed in the map. But you can see all of these layers and all these definitions that we have here in the map. You just sort of get those things, and we just have to populate the data to get all that stuff set up. So we talked already about this facility sites from the land use here, so we don't need to spend too much time on that. But really the value is that it's required for that map design like I was just showing you. And it's a starting point or a kind of basic solution that you might be able to take advantage of. But it also gives you some hints as to how you could take other data sets and massage them in certain ways to try and make them fit the target data model. And it's not just field mapping and those sorts of things. We can do some pretty sophisticated processing as we go through, and it's very efficient. And you know, a lot of people, once they get used to this, they say they couldn't live without it. So it's a pretty handy tool set for doing this sort of thing. So to get these examples, we have a link here.
That's from our
FME
Libyan website, Steve. Is that our Libyan website that we're referring to there?
Yeah, I guess that's what it is. Yeah, familiar.
Everybody, it is still running. There's no problem whatsoever. Our Libyan website is fine, so you can use that link.
But if you actually want to go look at it, what you'll get here is you can download some of these examples, like the data sets and the FME mapping files if you use that link, and you can get yourself over here and download the examples and take a look at it for your own purposes. And I do want to point out that you can see, and if a lot of you are already familiar with FME, you'll know that everybody's shapefiles on the left-hand side are going to be a little bit different. And so your solution, or the way you solve this, was going to be, it's going to take some work to get this together. But we just thought that this would be a useful example because it's a lot better than just a blank FME canvas there in Workbench as a starting point and a way to help you get going on this.
Yes, and again, I want to just mention a big thank you to the City of Austin. For years and years ago, long before people were talking about open data or anything else, the City of Austin had made available on their site a very comprehensive data set, which we were able to use at SAFE for testing purposes and all sorts of things. And again, we used their data for this experiment as well. So thanks to them for in some ways being visionaries on things. As well, I wanted to, I'm just going to send out via the chat. Hopefully all of you will get that. There was a lot of questions coming in on that. I know it's an exciting thing, that Schema Mapper. If you want to sort of liven up any party, you start talking about Schema Mapper and everybody's hanging around you. It always happens to Mark Ireland, I know. He's the guy that's our FME evangelist. I just sent you a link that goes through in fair detail about that, and I think in the follow-up materials we'll scrape together a couple other things around it. For doing migrations like this, the ability to move the intelligence out of hard coding in a workspace and into an external spreadsheet allows a much larger group, as Steve pointed out, to be able to modify and adjust those things outside of the actual flow of the data. So that's a nice thing as well. So I just wanted to kind of close down here today. We've got a few things left in the last couple minutes we've got to mention about the fact that you've seen all this working in this case here, but the principles you saw today can apply to all sorts of situations. So you can use this to bring this type of approach to bring any data at all into the ArcGIS environment or into models. I know at the Esri UC last week I attended a couple of sessions on 3D and the fact that you can use the same sort of approach exactly. I know Stu Rich of Penn Bay Media was showing bringing data from the National Building CAD standard into, I think, a campus-based map kind of program, which can be used right within the ArcGIS Online. Is that right, Steve? There's basically an extension of that model for kind of facilities to some degree?
Yeah, they've been working on a campus-based map, which is sort of like the topographic one, but focused in, inside of like 1 to 1,000 scale down to buildings and stripes on the pavement and parking curbs and all the details, and eventually inside the building as well.
Yeah, so it was quite an impressive demo to see these floor plans that were in DWG files run through exactly the same type of technique as Steve showed here, and out the other end he hits refresh inside of ArcGIS, and suddenly you can see the building floor plans all beautifully cartographically displayed. So that kind of approach is totally possible, and similarly you can use this sort of approach to take data you or have in ArcGIS and push it out to those folks who might not be in that environment. So either of those directions are totally possible. So it's our third poll question, and let me see if I can figure this out. So well, we wanted to just kind of ask one last question here of you, that now that you've seen all this, does this change any of your plans? Are you more or less likely to use this kind of technology? Lots of hopefuls. That's good to see. We'll just let this run for a minute or two. So that's great. Yeah, I do think that as we did our roadshow earlier this year, we started to bump into folks that were doing this kind of thing. We do every year a roadshow of many cities. Next April, we're going to be doing 20 cities across North America. So this should finally get me out of the kind of lowest tier of traveler into a higher tier, I'm hoping. So anyway, when we were visiting folks, we found out that many of them were doing this sort of thing. So let's just close that and share the results. So a good solid third of you already were doing this, and that's fantastic. Hopefully you picked up a few tips today. And 51% of you are aspiring to do it someday, and that's just great. And I just wanted to mention, Steve is a nice, humble Canadian, but he is available to be as a consultant. If some of you would like to buy some of his time, he definitely knows his stuff inside and out, and definitely could help you along in some types of these exercises as well. What I've heard people say before is that FME and data interop are very powerful pieces of technology, but FME and or data interop in the hands of an expert such as Steve, now that's really, really amazing what can be done. So we'll just leave it like that, and that's great. Thank you very much. Now, I think we've been using some of our space-age recording technology to record this webinar. So if you want to review this another time, and pick up something that you might have missed, or you want to send this to your friends, that's all going to be made available. We'll be sending a follow-up email with the details on where you'll be able to find that in the next day or so. And if you want to learn more about FME, there's a free trial of it on www.safe.com. You can get it there. The data interoperability extension, if you go to Esri's website, there's a 60-day trial of it. Hey, how come Esri gives a 60-day and we only give a 14? Maybe we should be a little bit, I never thought of that till I put it together here like that, but maybe there's an opportunity for us there. We're also happy to do a personalized web demo. If you email in, we can do that for you as well. We have a number of seminars and other webinars coming up in only, tomorrow. Tomorrow there's Intro to FME Desktop. If you go to safe.com, under the Learning menu item, you'll see the webinars there. You can sign up for that. We're going to be doing an introductory ArcGIS and FME/data interop presentation on July the 28th, and I do need to emphasize it's introductory, so if you've been using FME for more than 2 years, you should probably lower your expectations on that, but if you're new to us, then that would be a good thing to tune in. And now, a lot of people don't know that FME does raster stuff. Steve, did you know that?
Raster? What's raster?
Steve doesn't even know what raster is. So raster refers to imagery, Steve, and so I know the vector world is exciting, but sometimes folks need to do raster stuff, and it turns out that FME is quite a good tool for that. It's been doing that job since 2007, and we've never told anybody. So we're finally going to take the covers off of that, and if you want to tune in, maybe you'll learn a few things there. And lastly, there's on September the 15th, we're going to be doing some KML and FME stuff. A lot of folks do interesting things there with that, and bringing data from all over the place and making quite amazing KMLs, so you can dial into that as well. And lastly, we have training. We'll do it either on-site or we go on the road once in a while, or more commonly now, we're doing a lot of online training, a couple morning sessions, and you can don't even really have to leave the comfort of your nice, comfy office or cubicle, and you can tune in and get tuned up. Tune in and tune up on your FME skills. Which brings me to just a quick summary. What we've shown you today, I hope you've learned some things. You've seen how you can use this kind of approach to streamline the preparation for bringing stuff into the Community Maps program, so you can leverage all of the infrastructure that Esri is making available to folks for free. You can do this as a one-time, one-off, but more importantly, once you set these things up, once you figure out all those subtypes and so on, you can just keep cranking that every time there's an update and publishing that back up again. So that's the real value, is this, that when you're done all this, then you have something that can be automated and worked into your workflows without a lot of pain each time. So we're excited about having the ability to take part in this, and really glad that you tuned in. And I think there's one more thing before we part ways. That's right. So if any of you are interested, let me see if I can bring back my, whoa, I'm going to have troubles here. I got to bring back my polling device. Come on. Let's see. There it is. Okay, I need to ask you all, those of you that might want to win a chance to join our next online training class, so I've got that poll open, and we'll see who wants to have a shot at taking some FME desktop training, where you'll learn the secrets behind all the stuff that Steve was showing. I don't know, is the schema mapper covered, or is that something that it might be covered, or at least you'll get up to the point at which you'll be able to grasp the full beauty of the schema mapper, for those that don't. Okay, so I think we've got folks having chimed in on that. So thanks very much for that, and I think that's basically it for us. So we got time here. We're going to stay tuned in. If you have questions, do them via the chat, not the chat, the questions. Do your questions via the questions. Robin is standing by to type like mad, so please pepper them in. We'll hang around as long as folks are asking stuff. But for me here in Vancouver, and Steve, where are you anyway?
Today I'm in Toronto.
Oh, you're in Toronto. Hey, actually, is there any, before we just part ways, Robin, is there any great question that we should stump Steve with?
Yeah, Are the attributes, is the definition for the community mapping program on the Esri site?
Is the data model for the community maps program, Steve, where do you find that, or how did you know what to do? Is there a document or something that describes that in a lot of detail?
Yeah, the best way to get there is to go to the site that I mentioned before, resources.arcgis.com. And in the local government section, if you go there, you'll see that there's a base maps folder. There's several different ways to download the information model, but if you want to get started and you're interested in the base map part, you can take a look at this one and you can see some online stuff, but you can also download it as well. And they'll give you what they call the schema layer or schema only layer package, which turns into a geodatabase when you download it on your computer, and you can set the spatial reference for it as you're opening that up.
Right, and one thing we didn't mention to people is that inside of Workbench, there's a facility to import those schema definitions for the right-hand side.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's where I got them from, right? I didn't make them up. I just said, hey, here's my target geodatabase, and I want road center lines and other things, and then I got it.
That's right. So you don't have to tediously re-enter all that stuff. You can just suck it right in. So, Robin, any other questions worth passing on to Steve?
Sure. What Esri 3D formats are supported? You could even
well, what 3D formats are supported? So with respect to kind of 3D stuff, the main thing that people seem to want to bring stuff in is something called IFC, or Industry Foundation classes, and we will bring that in and make that into multi-patches in Esriland. We can also bring in Collada and make that into multi-patch. CityGML, I know we've got some European friends tuned in. CityGML always is a crowd pleaser in Europe, and so we can bring that in as well. And let's think, SketchUp, we can do things and put that into the geodatabase directly as well. On the Esri side, the 3D format that it always ends up as is a multi-patch with or without textures. It depends. So that's where that's going. Hopefully that answers that question. Anything else, Robin?
Community maps available as a web service.
Okay, Steve can answer that one. Is Community Maps available as a web service? Presumably after we put the data in there, how do people get access to it?
Yeah, so you can go to arcgis.com and just access the topographic base map. Once your data's been shared with Esri and pushed in, then that's where you'd get access to it. But you could also take that map we were looking at and just right-click it and publish that to your ArcGIS server on your own for your own site as well.
That's right, and in fact, if you put stuff into the Community Maps program, you don't actually have to use Esri clients particularly, or at least for pay Esri clients to view those maps, because I know folks can embed that in other websites, and you can use the free ArcGIS Explorer, I think, right, to examine those things.
Yeah, and it's just another cached base map, so you can use it in all sorts of different applications. Yeah, whether it's your server or whether you push it out to the Esri server too.
Yeah, so one of the nice things, if you're a city, you don't have to build your own infrastructure necessarily to be serving up that information. You can push it up there and then piggyback off of Esri's infrastructure, and folks can use it as a map service or inside of ArcGIS or in mobile apps or however they want to. Okay, so I think we'll call that good. So again, we've got Steve's contact info up there, so don't hesitate. I know Steve would be pleased to work with any of you on this call if that would be helpful, or if you want to get in touch with SAFE, we've got a couple of things there as well. But I think we'll call that good from Vancouver and Toronto. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, goodbye.